All right, and welcome back to another Conquest Corner. This one part of the tactics series I'm doing. One, it might be easy to see or tough to see, but I'm actually at a pretty hard angle sitting here right now. The reason I'm doing that is I've been having some leg pain issues. Actually, at time of you seeing this, I had my MRI maybe the day of this being released. But because of that, that's why I'm kind of at a bit of a hard angle. So that's why my microphone looks so high and I might be a little bit lower than normal. But I've been sitting around doing a lot of nothing for too long, and I wanted to do something. And sitting like this actually doesn't hurt me whatsoever. So, for this particular tactics video, there was I put on one of the previous videos. I asked like, hey, what kind of things people want to talk about? And one of the things I wanted to do was talking about sizes of regiments and all. And someone also suggested a bit of, since they're newer at rank and flank games, actually deploying on the board and all of that. So mostly this video is going to be about discussions related to the size of a regiment to take, why I take them in the numbers that I do, or anything all around those sort of ideas. But there'll be a little bit about bringing them all in the field and all. I'm probably going to do a separate video discussing more deployment strategies and all, but there'll be a little bit of that here as well. Keep in mind, if you are interested in this game or you play it or you want to pick up anything new, like they just showed the, I think it's called the Talos, the new unit for city-states. I think that's the name. If you're looking at that or anything else that you want to pick up, we do have a discount code you can use. It's Train Kickers. It is posted up in the show notes. It also might show up later on the video itself off to the side. But you use that, saves you 10%. Anything you want to buy in their store saves you money, helps us out as well. And it really does help us be able to do all the things that we want to do. But getting beyond that then. So, like I said, these videos are more defined probably or intended for newer players, be it either newer to this game or newer to rank and flank type games in general, just to kind of go over sort of my thoughts of different pieces to it. So the other video I've done so far was more about turn zero, sort of what happens before you get to the game, and then how to kind of handle supremacies. Again, that sort of before the game part, because this game has multiple before the game parts. This one I want to talk about sizes of regiments. And I thought this was an interesting one because I've seen through both my local play group as well as depending on which army I'm playing, which for anyone who doesn't know, one of the stores I go to, Rogue State Gaming, just had their own auction. And there were some really good deals going on for 100 Kingdoms as well as some Spires. So now I own some 100 Kingdoms Spires. As, the leg allows. My original plan was to finish my Sorcerer Kings this week. I haven't really been able to do much painting because today's like kind of the first day things are okay. But the plan is over about the next week to two to get them done. And then I get into those other two armies, get those painted up. We're hopefully going to start recording some stuff again as soon as my leg is better. Although we can do some stuff on TTS as well, but some live stuff we're hoping to do on some Sundays. If we can't do it this Sunday, maybe a Sunday or so afterwards we'll be able to. But I find depending on the army I play and against the other people that I play against, they sometimes have different feelings about this, is how many how many stands to actually take in a regiment. So that was sort of what the discussion I wanted to have today was. Now, let's start with the basics. We're not going to discuss monsters or anything like that. Anything that's a single stand, because there's nothing more you can do with it. So that's a very easy thing. So I tier this discussion in a few different ways. And I think the most logical spot to start is by unit purpose a little bit. Or actually, no, here's actually how I think we should start. Let's discuss sort of the options. Now, there's obviously you could be a 3-stand minimum regiment, as this game essentially does. Nothing gets lower than that, at least is starting. And there is no rule for effectively how many stands you could add other than the points limit of the game. You could go crazy if you wanted. Now, you do have to be at least 2 wide. So you do have to fit at least that. But otherwise, not many building restrictions. Obviously, all of your ranks have to end up having the same amount going through, other than the very last one. So if you're 3 is fine, then the last one could be however many you want, but you can't be 3, then 2, and then another 2 or something like that. So you have to try to match except for the very last level. So when we're thinking about this, let's talk a little bit about why this is a real discussion. this discussion for realistically probably about 2 points. First point, points in the game alone, obviously. So the effectiveness of a unit changes depending on its size, depending on your rules. So if you have things like support, then being a bigger unit isn't necessarily much of a detriment to you in terms of that at least. But if you say you don't have support, taking, a giant brick of anything else might not really do you that good, depending on the way in which you position it and how wide you make it. And we'll make that part of our discussion as well. So, what you can get away with is one thing. Obviously, for this game, I would say in general, you want, not counting characters, probably 7 to 10 regiments. I think that's usually pretty fair. 8 to 9 seems about the number I sit on. I wouldn't want to go less. I think you're going to lose too much out on activation timing. I think you're putting, too many eggs in one basket. Your units are probably far too large. Yeah, they might be able to do a lot of good, but there's not many of them. Maybe they're either easy to avoid, or if I happen to have a good counter, if I have something to do about it, you can't do much. And if you're going much over 10, my thought would be you're probably running too many weak units that anything I have with some strength is just going to bowl over. So you're probably looking at 8 to 10. Probably 8 to 9 is, or 7 to 10, 8 to 9 is probably the main range. And then 2 to maybe 3 characters. 4 if you run some crazy stuff like I do. Actually, a lot of my lists are on 4 characters. But, so that's the one part, obviously. The other part, the real main consideration you have otherwise in this, is breaking as well as shattering. So, let's keep in mind the way these rules work. At the start of a turn, or a round, let's say a round, because also in case you're coming from another game, that'll be clearer. When you're taking a look at a round, start of the round, you look at, hey, how many stands are in this regiment? When they lose half, essentially, as second they hit half, round it up, because it's a round up game, but second that they hit half, then you are looking at breaking that unit. As soon as from that moment forward, that exact second it occurs, if they lose half of what's remaining from there, they shatter, remove. Now, I know Dwag have some way to break this rule because they technically unbreak before they really break, but let's assume everyone else who gets to play by the rules. And keep in mind, if you are playing or playing against Old Dominion, they still break and shatter the same way. They might not take resolves, but they still leave the battlefield in that same way. You're essentially just destroying the undead corpses, I guess. So, with that being said, that means certain numbers of stands are overall not a great idea. So if we think of, let's talk about no characters for a second. If you're thinking about 3 stands in your regiment, if you have 3, that means in a single round, I need to destroy 2 to break you. You have 1 left, but then if that one gets destroyed, you're just gone anyway. So you're not losing anything extra. Let's say there's stands with 4 wounds each. If I can do 12 wounds, I remove you no matter what. So let's say instead you're a 4 stands. If you're a 4 stands, that means, and again, we're assuming at the start of the round you're 4 stands. Obviously, maybe I took out a stand previously, now you're only 3, but let's just assume starting numbers. I destroyed 2 stands in my attack. You are now broken. If I get rid of 1 more stand, you will now shatter. So previously, again, if we're assuming 4 wounds a stand, previously 12 wounds destroyed you. Now 12 wounds still destroys you. So that means if you're not talking characters, 4 stands, you really have to think about if that's advantageous. Because all they have to do is if they can wipe 3 out of 4, they wipe all 4. Your entire unit is removed. And if you're someone who, or an army that has a good amount of healing, you now have lost a lot of potential. It's the same reason why things like 5 can be a little bit tough. In 5, you have a little bit more of a leeway there. They destroy 3 and then 1, broken, shatter. So they can destroy 4 to kill 5. If you're looking at 6, that starts to fall away because now they have to take out 3, then 2 more. So now they're having to take down 5. They had taken a lot down, more stands. So to me, the real break point is about 4 stands, sometimes 5, but really at 4. And Let's also mention that if you are talking characters, it changes it because if the regiment is gone, the character cannot survive. So that means if you have three stands and a character, when you take out the three, the character doesn't get to live alone anyway, so it's effectively the same. There's no like loss if you want to put it that way. But let's kind of content ourselves for the moment of not character stands. So to me, I take four bases with no intention of characters, only under, or four stands, only under certain conditions. One, it's a good survivable unit. So I'm looking at things that are a bit hardier. Oftentimes, if we're thinking, say, Dwag or Wadroon, I don't mind it there because they tend to have more wounds. If you are five wounds, or in Dwag home ways, you're hardier in general, you have good resolves, you have good defense. Wadroon, at least they're a little bit better on terms of wounds. Not always better on defense, but at least better on wounds. I don't mind it as much because you have to take out more to take me out in one shot. This is absolutely a game where if someone wants to hit you with the right thing, they can crush a lot of stands real fast. I've absolutely had on some of my, 2 defense, 2, 3 resolve units lose 12, 13, 14 wounds in one hit. A unit of brutes comes in, say some brute drones come in, hit you hard, you could lose a lot of units really, or a lot of models, a lot of wounds really, really fast. So it's not unheard of for them to do, the 12 wounds if you're 4 wounds to stand. If you're 5, you're a bit safer. Now, if you have other good things, say you have really good defenses, say you have really, really good resolve, maybe then you can chance it. But I find for myself, if it's not character based, if this isn't a central piece for me, I usually keep them at 3, or if I want to expand, then I want to expand them to 5. Now, I know at 5 you can still be removed without having to remove all stands in one shot, but the extra wounds now really start to pile on. I find the sweet spot, at least lately in games I've done, especially when I've been playing my Sorcerer Kings, which means I actually have resolve, I've been finding my sweet point is to be above 12. I want above 12 wounds on something if I'm worried about what's going to happen to it, because that is a reasonable amount of wounds that I could be taking. Doesn't mean you'll take it from everything, but if someone hits you with a decent unit, it's not uncommon to take 12 or so wounds. So I want that to be my break point. I want 12 wounds to either, okay, I'm just gone because I was only 3 stands with 12 wounds, or I want enough to be able to survive out if I hit by 12 so I don't break and shatter immediately. Well, if you're 5 wounds a stand, you won't. So a little 4 block is fine, especially if you're 5 wounds a stand with a really good defense or really good resolve. Then you're probably not losing too many. Take Trolls, for instance. Trolls' stats aren't that great, but they have a lot of wounds per stand. They're 6 wounds a stand. So running them in a unit of 4, maybe not such a bad idea. 3 is kind of rough, but 4 could make it work. 5 is probably much, much better, because at 5, now they have to get rid of 18 wounds to remove your healing in one flat go. If they take down one stand in a previous round, well, 1, you could bring it back, but 2, now they have to get through 12 to remove your healing, try to get them to go early, heal them back, and all of that. A player in our local who does very well with them actually usually runs a 6-pack, often with a character, but a 6-pack, because then you have to do a lot of damage to actually start removing stands and start getting to that break/shatter condition. So I tend not to go 4 unless I have a really good reason why. And in these units where I'm looking at, a lot of Norge units, a lot of 100 Kingdoms units, city-states units, Sorcerer King, Old Dominion, all these 4 wound people, if they don't have amazing stats, I'm kind of concerned of doing that. I don't want to give up freebies to my opponent. And I don't want to lose an extra 40 to 50 points that I would have spent that I don't get to do anything with because you hit me with something that removed my 1 extra stand, essentially, by breaking and shattering me. Okay. So that's one thought. I'd rather run min than 4 unless I have a really good reason. Just me personally. Like I said, if you're running Dragholm or like Wadroon, you can make arguments otherwise. For almost all the armies. Or, again, if you're running like brute units. If you got big, heavy brutes. Yeah, it's possible. You could go more. But also sometimes in brutes, I find that you don't get enough out of the extra stand. So in brutes, I've lately been running them usually in 3s if my goal is to have a cheaper units to be able to kind of do what I want. They hit where I want, but also be a little bit of a throwaway. What I mean by that, no matter what tactics you think you're doing, your opponent is trying to do tactics back at you. You could sit there and have a giant unit of, 6 Centaur Avatara and say they're going to do all these great and wondrous things. But there's no guarantee it's going to happen because your opponent knows the things that you probably want to do and it's going to try to be countering them. So, am I gaining more by spending all those extra points, or would I gain more by taking, say, 2 units of 3, or taking a unit of 3, maybe 4, and then doing something else with the rest of the points? Sometimes, especially when we talk about brutes, 3 is all you need because I oftentimes would rather have 2 units as opposed to 1. Depends on the unit, depends on the army, depends on some pieces like that. But the reason why I want that is I don't want you to be able to counter and stop me off of 1 luck. Whether that you got the lucky charge, you got the lucky you went first that round, you pulled the card faster than I could pull a card because I had to set things up a certain way, whatever the reason would be. But I want to have options. And to have good options means I want more units. So I find for at least the heavier things like brutes, I tend to go with the 3. Unless they're very particular ones, then I might go to 4 or 5. Again, I tend to skip the 4. I tend to go towards 5. But carefully, when I can afford them, I run a unit of 5. I skip the 4 for that reason, but I go to 5. Same sort of thing when I'm thinking about Avatara. Avatara, I'll run a pack as a 3. But when I really want them to do something, or I kind of have the points, I'll run them as a 5-pack. Again, I tend to avoid 4s with them, unless it's with a character. Then I'll run 3 in a character, but otherwise I'll go straight to 5s. Because I think you have to do so much more as an opponent. Same thing with Cataphractii, any of my cavalry models. I usually go to 5. If I'm not doing 3, I go to 5. I, for one, don't find often a need to go much more than about 5. 6, maybe. Again, if you're running phalangites when you're city-states, sure, go to 6. I've seen more. Even right now with my ghouls, I usually run 5s. 6s aren't bad, but I save the points for upgrades. So 5. 5's enough that you have to do a good amount of wounds to kind of start knocking me down. And it's enough that even with their really, really bad defenses and resolves and essentially their ways not to get destroyed, they stick. They don't get destroyed on that initial hit. They actually do get to swing back. And in their cases, with 7 attacks to stand, they'll do something. So those are sort of the numbers I tend to look at personally. And that's sort of the viewpoint that I have for this. Like I said, I don't go above 6. I have had things at 6. The only units I'd probably ever go above 6 are something like phalangites, or maybe some sort of drone or clone in spires with like a biomancer to be healing them up in them or next to them or something like that. But otherwise, or maybe certain things in 100 Kingdoms, maybe. If we take a look at a few of those, there are some of those that could go kind of big. I have it over here on the side. I can always pull it up as I kind of meander through. Although I'm more of meandering than anything. Like, I mean, yeah, you could do it big with like militia because they're cheap, but I don't think that's a good use of points to go up to a giant unit. Maybe for, not even for a thing of men at arms. I don't think you gain anything from those. Who might want to do it? I've seen it with Gilded Legion, and Gilded Legion same way for phalangites or those sort of units, because they have rules like Pike Formation and Iron Discipline. You lose your bonuses if you hit them. That's essentially what this sort of stuff does. And they hit pretty hard back because they have Cleave 1. They don't have tons of attacks and support 2. So, hey, taking a giant unit means you can run a 3x3 or however you want to run it, or 3 by almost 3 because you have 6, 7 stands and then your character and all. Because you're getting half the attacks from the other stands. So you're not really losing much. So for these sort of units, yeah, I think you could go larger. I would say personally, for the way that I build a list, that's one of the first things I cut. I'll cut a few stands down because I'd rather some quality than just the quantity. But hey, quantity has a quality all on its own. So that's a little of my thought on the amount of stands to take. Like I said, 3 is a good spot. There's nothing wrong with just keeping 3. If you're worried about survivability, really consider, are you survivable 4? If you're not a survivable 3 or not a survivable 4, realistically, especially because they don't have to do it in one hit, they could just do it in one round. So they could hurt you, break you in the one, and then they'll have to take one more down. So how survivable are you? If you're going to run characters, I think 3 with a character is fine. That 4 works fine. I think 4 with a character works fine. I think 5 with the character works fine. When you have characters, you have a lot more play with it. And I think you probably don't want to be looking much more than 6 unless you have a really, really good reason. For formations, a lot of that, like the way to run them, kind of depends on their purpose. So when we think of these different units, if this is your backfield objective holder, my backfield objective holders, if they have characters, are 2x2. So character, command stand, 2 stands behind. I don't go any wider than that because their goal is to sit on the objective. I want them as thin as possible. I want them thin, 1, so I can get past them more easily. They're not taking up room in terms of size. I know they're wider, but in terms of size. And if someone gets to engages them, they are smaller in general for me to be able to get around or get charges into the opponent, either front or flank. If you're running that way, your opponent is almost guaranteed to be overhanging. Your opponent is probably hitting you as a 3-pack. And if they're hitting you as a 3-pack, then you're in better shape. Let me click this. Yeah, so I have TTS for anyone watching. Instead of just listening, I have TTS open as well. So maybe we'll go to this a little bit to kind of discuss it. Like I said, I do these as 2-packs. Okay, so to kind of mention what I was talking about there, if, like I said, assume one of these is a character, just for simplicity, I'll run them this way. And the reason I like that is because then if I have an objective, let's assume that right there is our objective. If I have an objective, then this unit 1, pretty small profile for not going too far and get 2 stands on. If I want to move up a little bit more, I can now have 4, where naturally if I'm, say, a 4 across, I'm a bit of a wider frame. I'm easier to hit. So what I like about this, like I said, if your unit that you're going against is even a 2 or a 3, when they line up against you, they'll either have to overhang, because remember, in this game, you got to try to maximize. You either overhang a little bit on both sides. That gives me options for my other units to be able to see them to come in. Or if they overhang heavy on one side, they might be doing against the sort of refused flank, sort of a bit, they're on the opposite side of where I am. But with them being a bit smaller, if I position myself well, be aware, in this game, when you're talking about movement, I'll do a separate one related to movements. You don't want to put your units too close because once they're engaged, you're not allowed to cross over units anymore. Otherwise, you're naturally allowed to cross over your own, so you want some space. But now instead, they're giving you a flank. So they might want to pull this way, so they give you a front charge. But if they're giving you a front charge, you now can get half of your units in, or essentially all of them in if they're, say, 3 wide. So my objective holders are only going to go this way if they have a character. If I have more, they're probably just going to stack back. My objective holders don't get wider in general, unless they're really like a big swinging type thing. So when I think of my, which they're probably not my objective holders. So when I'm thinking of Legionnaires, I'm thinking of Roger Kerr. When I'm thinking about, Household Guard, when I'm thinking about those units who their goal is to sit somewhere, this is the way that they sit. When I'm thinking about pretty much anyone else, in 3s. When I'm running 4, I often will run them this way. If I'm running 5 of something, I'll run them wide. I've done before Varangian Guard with Ziliarch running 6 wide. Because if you're careful, it's not that unwieldy. It is a little unwieldy. And it almost guarantees you're coming back table edge just because of how long you are if you wanted to do a reinforcement line. So here's what I mean by that. Let's say for a moment, let's get a measurement here. Let's say for a second that your unit had Vanguard and all those sorts of things. So that means they are, there we go. They are essentially to this distance here. They're this far up. They're about 18 inches up the board. That makes your back end about 16 or so inches. All right, so that's about how far you are. That means, let's say it's just even a 4-pack for a moment, just to keep our life simple here. Even if this is just a 4-pack, this is where they're allowed to come in on the round. Now, when we talk about movement purposes here, let's say for a moment you're 5 move. You're 5 move with a banner. Let's say you got 11 inches. Yeah, you could spend a few of the move, about 2-3 of the inches to come onto the board. But let's say you're just trying to maximize your mount forward. So if we start rotating these guys, just to get to the board, just rotating around, you've eaten up your movement. And you're really not even on the board yet. Notice there's a problem there. So even if you do fully get on the board, then you're not getting on the board well. Also, sorry if any weird jank happens. It's TTS. This is a great mod. I really enjoy it, and I'll put it in the show notes. Some information to find about it. And it lets you play and all. But, hey, TTS can be janky at times. That means you're probably looking at walking on a little bit of a rotation. Sorry. There we go. And then I'll walk forward a bit or something like that. But notice, you're not really any further forward because of how wide this is. You would have got further if instead, if they're back here and you just walk from the edge. If you now go up your 11, you're not really that much further back. You're a little more forward if you'd done it the other way. But you're angled, and you have to ask, is that worthwhile? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. If your unit's even wider, it gets even worse. So it is something you do have to think about, but I will run them wide, especially if my goal is to come from the back edge. Even if not, I usually run my units mostly wide. 1, it obviously gives you more attacks. 2, it takes up more board space, which can be good. 3, if I'm careful about what I'm doing, I know that means it can maximize what my opponent can do, but it maximizes me as well. And I'm just trying to time the correct hits. If it is a unit that wants to hit but doesn't take a hit well, thinking like ghouls, then I run them 3 wide in 5 or 6 packs. I don't run them the full way across. When I'm thinking of ranking guard, when I'm thinking Bucephali, when I'm thinking Avatara, I will run them as wide as I have them. Because I'm not as worried about you hitting me. I'm not saying I'm not going to take some damage, but I want more hits rather than I want to save more. Be aware the shorter or the less wide you run, we did here, in general, the safer that you are, but the less you're going to do. So some units want to be safe. Your backfield holders want to be safe. Your shooting units obviously want to try to be wide if they can, because they're not getting shots otherwise, or getting very few, I should say. So your shooting units want to be reasonably wide. Your big hitters, I find, want to go the 4, sometimes 5 wide, depending on what they are. That I've absolutely run Varangian Guard 6 wide. And I hit someone, and yeah, you can hit me back too, but I'm fine with that. It does bug me. Because I'm getting more on you, and I have the advantage then. At least I feel that I have the advantage. So that's a little bit about regiment sizes, the reasons why I take them the way I do, the sort of thoughts I have about it. I do want to do another video related to, since someone asked about deployment and the way in which I deploy and all. This kind of got onto that. But I do have other bits of deployment, especially bringing them onto the board, closeness that I put units, when do I have units leapfrog one another, how far apart do I have them. So I am going to do something separate about that to kind of get into it more. I'm going to use TTS extensively for that and try to set up some scenarios to kind of discuss the way in which I view the game and the way in which I try to maximize all of that. So as always, do thank everyone who does watch any of these videos. Like I said, do apologize if I'm in a little bit of a weird position, but it's comfortable. And right now, at the last few days, my goal is to find what's comfortable for myself. So, like I said, by the time you'll see this, hopefully a doctor will tell me what's going on and what I can do. So, like I said, if you want to pick up any Conquest, we do have the discount code. A lot more people have been using it lately, which we do really think. One, like I said, helps you guys out as well, but it really does help us. As soon as I feel well enough, I want to do a bunch more things. My hope is pretty soon, but we'll have to see about that. But once I feel up to it, we have some more battle reports we're going to do. For the one that we did where the audio didn't quite work, someone mentioned that maybe even just a sort of sped up or talking through decision making would be interesting. So I'm going to sit down and try to edit that into a decision making video where I talk about board states and why I make the choices that I do. That might be very interesting. What I'd like to do in the future for our battle reports is to give you sort of the mostly unedited version where you can just if you're the type like me who just watches full games and lets them run while I'm doing stuff and I listen for things and I look up and all, you got that. But if you want to catch it in a shorter format, more of just a discussion of here's what happened, here's why it happened sort of thing, that we do that as well. And that is something I want to do for the next battle report that we're going to do. Hopefully within about another week or so when I'm a little bit more mobile, get another one in with Steve. Might be able to do it this Sunday, but we have to kind of see. So bear with us while I bear with my leg, but as soon as that is better, you'll be seeing a whole bunch more stuff. Otherwise, you'll be seeing me at a rather steep angle, but at a workable angle. So on behalf of everyone here then at the show, have some good hobbying and some great gaming.